God of glory, Lord of love, hearts unfold like flowers before thee, healthy as the sun above. Now the clouds of sin and sadness drive our dark down away. Giver of immortal hands, fill us with the light. Fill us with the light. Oh, fill us with the light of day.
So stay tuned for another episode of TNFro is Reading. Reading to learn, learning to rewrite her own narrative. Welcome to another episode of TNFro is Reading. Hi, I'm your host, Felicia Baxter. What we'll be covering today is going over any updates to the Libby's List, whether written word or movies in this case, what's capturing my attention in the news, what I'm reading, as well as my featured tweet or post of the day and my daily affirmations. And then I'll conclude with a bit of advice. GYM is number one in mind and body wellness. Shop now to discover new apparel, storage solutions, as well as hydration containers, and membership to exercise streaming services. To flex your mind and muscle, navigate to gym.com/TNFro and check out special offers updated daily at www.dalesangelsinc.com. Now back to the show. So welcome back to the podcast. What actually am I adding to my ever-growing laundry list of must-reads? I am still reading Nick Bolton's American Kingpin. I am finding time to read it in between cases that I review on a daily basis. But this book is in itself, it requires you being present and your full attention because of the simple fact that it is so deep and detailed in the workings of the dark web, how this guy, Albrecht, Nick Albrecht, just, it's crazy how he had his libertarian beliefs, was running a potential $1 billion drug empire, also guns, also explosive, and even body parts at one point in time. They were running on this website, and he was doing it because of his belief that society should rule government and instead of vice versa, and how the government agencies that he was so much against were so invested in bringing them down that the line between truth and lies became blurred, and who was actually on the right side of the law. So I definitely still recommend that book, and I'm glad I added that to the list. In addition to it, because it seems to be such a pictorial uh, album of epic proportions. It's Versailles, A History by Robert Abrams. That's actually on sale on Kindle, but I'm actually looking for the hardback of that, and I probably can find that on a Libris.com at a pretty good price. Plug out to a potential sponsor, but anyways, and I think that would make actually a great coffee table book. And then there is Spread Spectrum, Hedy Lamarr, and the Mobile Phone by Rob Walters. I'm just completely stunned. This superstar back in the 30s and 40s, how she was known as one of the most beautiful women in the world. Maybe. But, anyways, how she was actually brilliant. And if she had been probably born in a different time, she actually would have, if she had been allowed to, her discoveries and her, uh, she would have actually been able to create, or been, until now after her death, she would have been given full credit for what we are enjoying today. Um, Between the mobile phone, my stupid podcast, Wi-Fi, all of them goes back to her imagination. And I think that's going to be a great read. And then I came across The Ways of White Folks by Langston Hughes almost by accident. Some of them are humorous retelling of stories in his interaction and probably friends' interactions, sometimes negatives, but sometimes positive, but overall humorous interaction with white people. So I think that's also going to be a good read. And also, what else is in the news? And I wanted to make sure that not only did I change the format of the podcast itself to shorten it to brevity, I wanted to basically not focus on the same things that other podcasts were focusing on. There are so many podcasts and the news agencies that focus on negativity, gossip, and rumors. If you want to listen to that, this is not that podcast. You will have to research and listen to those things on your own. But I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and on my way to work, I listen to The Breakfast Club, and one part of Breakfast Club it makes me laugh. Sometimes it's just downright mean, but I wanted to uh, just reiterate the donkey of the day, which was a couple of weeks ago. They gave this to Linda Fairstein. It was hysterical. You have to go to the Breakfast Club and listen to Charlemagne the God, one of the hosts on the Breakfast Club, go off on her. Because I think I listened to this right before I actually saw the movie. But for those of us that have not listened to or looked at the Netflix special by Ava DuVernay, When They See Us, Linda Fairstein is the detective that assisted the DA that was head of the sex crimes unit in 1989 to railroad 5 boys, now men, to confess to crimes they did not commit. She was so dug in that even when they were finally exonerated almost 20 years later, this is after DNA had cleared them, and the actual rapist and murder, because he would go on to murder somebody else after he attacked the jogger in Central Park. Um, she still said that they were guilty of something, and she still refuses to this day to apologize to these young men, that even if they were caught up in the what they call wilding that was going on in that park that night, it still did not justify them getting locked up as kids, and spending 20 years of their lives and ending their childhood. That was not justice that was not a punishment fitting whatever crime she thought that they committed. And all the time she wasted in trying to railroad these young men, she didn't even protect the young lady, because the dude would go on to rape, brutalize, and murder four other women after these guys were locked up. She didn't even protect her own gender. So, and now she is completely unashamedly ticked off that this movie characterizes the depravity that went into that whole prosecution and prosecutorial misconduct, as well as just the garbage of that goes back to this investigation. Because under her orders, she directed her underlings to gather evidence to convict the wrong people, while the real murderer and rapist went free and went on to brutalize other people. And I think, and she won't apologize for it. She's just completely dug in. And I think even at this point, almost 30 years later, even if she did come forward and apologize to these men, I don't think they would buy it. I think it's too late. She had her chance and she opted to just dig in, and it was just appalling. That's the word that just keeps coming out. And she's threatening lawsuit because somehow the truth or how it was portrayed, she's taking as slander. But I thought the illness of slander, if what is said is untrue. But what that movie just highlighted, the unjustified, the lack of justice, and her railroading and her complicity in all of that nonsense. So I don't think she has a case, but we'll see. So she and the city and the state of New York, from what I understand, that lawsuit, when they got awarded that $40 million reward, most of that probably went away in lawyers' fees, and then they had to split it up 5 ways. So I doubt that any of them still have any of that money. And that's what was his name? Raymond Santana. It was very poignant that a point that he actually made, because the 5 men, Kevin Richardson, Antron McCray, Raymond Santana Jr., Corey Wise, and Yusef Salaam, or Dr. Yusef Salaam, they were recently interviewed, and I saw the cast from the movie, as well as those young men, were on OWN just recently and interviewed by Oprah. He basically reiterated that 40 million doesn't go a long way when about probably 75% of that went to all of the lawyers. Also, I was struck by multiple things. One, in instance, in how all starstruck all of them were and enamored they were with Oprah. And it also seemed that, I don't know, because he took so many head injuries, but it just seemed Corey Wise was high, or something was off with him. Um, and also, I was struck by how hurt and angry Antron McCray was. And from what I understand, recently he lost his mother, and he's still, that hurt and his pain is still right up on the surface, but he won't go to counseling. I don't know what the deal is behind that, but I hope that young man gets some help. When They See Us is the most poignant, sad, anger-inducing work of art I've actually seen this year, and I highly recommend it. But now let's pause for a word from one of my potential sponsors. Last chance for fresh Cooper River sockeye and the all-new Barkley Sound sockeye. This is the 19th summer of Fresh and Wild, and it's in full swing at Sea Bear Smokehouse. They source remarkably fresh wild salmon, halibut, and more from the niche fisheries across the Pacific Northwest. They hand fillet and ship fresh directly to you. Navigate to seabear.com/TennesseeFro for this and other deals. Or navigate to the company website, DalesAngelsInc.com, for these and updated daily deals. Now back to the podcast. Good morning. My daily affirmations today starts with another, or based on my reading of Unlearn. And it's about selfishness and selflessness. And it's okay to work on yourself, but not at the expense of others, and knowing to tell the difference. But the baseline is allowing other people to grow around you and not have to bend to you all the time. It comes down to this mantra: I'ma do me, you do you. Focus on being the right person. Life is too short, so surround yourself with people you want to be around. Realize you can't help everyone. Encourage what excites people when you can and when you want to, or when you feel like it. That's okay. I love to read, obviously. Therefore, the Tennessee Fro is Reading podcast. But for those hard to find titles, navigate to alibris.com. Alibris.com is chock full of hundreds of thousands of titles at a reasonable cost. So navigate to alibris.com/Tennessee Fro for those special deals. Plus, you can also navigate to DalesAngelsInc.com and check out updated daily deals at your pleasure. Now back to the podcast. So welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Tennessee Fro. So I am going to be reading from my own written book. Yes, Felicia Baxter, have published a book. And it's not a lifelong work. It's just something that I did as a challenge, because that's how I tend to live my life. I wasn't encouraged, nor was I discouraged to write this book. About 4 or 5 years ago, a girl that I went to school with, she wrote a book, and I paid $19.99 for that book, and it ticked me off because I'm still mad that I paid $20 for that book, and I thought it kind of sucked. But that aside, I knew I had a story to tell, and it was a combination of multiple things. I've had many, many jobs. I've had the opportunity to meet different people and visit different places. And I've lived, unfortunately, I've moved like 10 or 11 times in the past 19 years. But I wanted to take all of those experiences, or pieces of those experiences, and write a narrative that hopefully will be entertaining, as well as lifting, as well as would people actually pay or buy it. So thereupon came my book, Not My Family. And as the commercial says, it's basically loosely autobiographical. And I was able to mix in some historical things, because I think we are shaped by our past and influenced definitely by our genetics. but our lives and how we experience it. Sometimes as a child, those decisions are not made by you, and this would be a way to, well, is it side seat quarterbacking, to see if different decisions were actually made and what the outcomes could have been, and how and what propels you to work so hard to get what you have. So I'm going to start kind of several chapters in, but this is called Holidays. Most children love Christmas and school breaks. My holidays during my childhood as Maria Butler were fraught with yelling and drunken brawls. One year, Ronald had a drunken fit because he wanted us to stay and celebrate Christmas at home. He got high, threw the tree and our gifts on the front lawn, and set it all on fire. That was the last time we put up a tree, and we would only get gifts if we went to an aunt's house. They finally separated when I was 15 years old, and then we would put up a small tree and get a few gifts. We lived with Darlene's mother until we could get placed in Section 8 housing, and two of my uncles were weed fans and drunks who lived with her. I bought myself a dark blue beach cruiser from the money I saved in babysitting for 1 year at the age of 13, and my uncle sold it for $50 to buy drugs. I always wanted to be like the commercials with families celebrating all the major holidays together, but that just wasn't part of the Butler family. As a adult, I would attempt to be nowhere near Virginia during the holidays. I preferred a more tropical environment, and I even tried snow in Belgium 1 year. The idea of packing up, getting strip searched by TSA, and the connections, the stale recycled air, and being in a foreign country was not very palatable. When I settled in Chattanooga on the Tennessee River, my house was lit up from space from Thanksgiving until January 1st. I had snowmen on the lawn, flashing lights outlining the roof, and it was a real seizure-inducing spectacle. I would send out holiday cards to friends with my updated address. I sent gourmet food baskets to relatives I still halfway spoke to, and everyone else got holiday-inspired texts. I stopped sending more than gift cards to relatives, and there were definitely no presents because I knew I wouldn't even get a thank you note or a card in return. 1 year, I got a generic card from one of my aunts and he used for their janitorial business, but there was not so much as a shoebox greeting from anyone else. They all knew I screened my calls and didn't attempt to call to even ask for money anymore. One aunt told me it was rude to send cards with no money in them, and she stopped getting them years ago. By early December, my administrative duties for the Yuletide season were over. I would go to a few office parties and business association gatherings. The week leading up to Christmas was just for me. I would plan on watching all the greatest Christmas shows on loop, and after devouring a hearty breakfast on Christmas morning, I would go to the movies and then plan an exotic meal for one as I scratched off $100 worth of scratch tickets and listened to Johnny Mathis on vinyl. The first time I did it was kind of a lark, but it was so peaceful that I kept it up for 3 years straight. The holidays are supposed to be with family, but when you have no family or no family you liked, it is okay to settle for peace. You're alone, but it's peaceful and drama-free. When Hurricane Maura hit me to the Purcell High holidays, I was a bit taken aback. Birthdays and weddings ruled my social calendar, and I could be booked up for 2 years in advance. She described the coordination of 4 high holidays. Juneteenth, or June 19th, was the lead up to July 4th, because if you celebrated Juneteenth when the slaves in Texas were notified they were free 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, then it was okay to celebrate July 4th. Easter was a way to celebrate, and it was huge in my grandmother's family. It was the largest besides Christmas. Even though she and her sister and cousins had converted to Baptist years prior, they still observed many of the traditions and observances surrounding Easter because it was tied back to the family's time in Algiers. My grandmother, her sisters, and more were the OCD planners of the family, and this crew was the keeper of the family address, birthday, and anniversary book. Everyone had a role, and you carried it out because it was the expectation. The family business had provided handsomely for everyone for generations, so children graduated from a Texas school and continued to work locally or at least within a few hours' drive. If you could not attend the myriad of weddings, funerals, and birthday parties, you could at least keep in contact with people, enjoy the festivities from wherever you were. Hurricane Warren, Grandma M, would guide me through all of this since I was a newbie, which was a lot of fun. Halloween started the family planning for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and Mara shared the electronic version of the family Bible, which she and David had created 9 years earlier, complete with the white cover, gold lettering and script, and pages that turn. It was so complete and included the names and links to cemetery plots for relatives that had passed on. It also had useful information on who had hosted family festivities and who was up next. Most relatives were easy, and there were those who loved to complain but still came through. The entire document itself was amazing in detail and usefulness. It was like the who's who of the Purcell family. According to the legend, I wasn't the last to be added. My spot had already been there. It just needed to be updated. I participated and was completely fascinated by the efficiency of the process. It was almost effortless. There were multiple prongs of business, mostly in food services, and the family farm and herds they maintained. We also had a seafood arm that maintained the oysters and shrimp. Most of the family lived within a few hours of San Padre, and having the holidays at the family house was indeed a feat of planning. Participating in Thanksgiving and Christmas there was truly a blessing. The idea of creating new memories was overwhelming and disconcerting at times. Would I really like being around so many people? Well, yes. Our first years of family did have some hard parts, but for the most part, it was very enjoyable. I have zero recollection of being part of the Purcell family or even much of life before the age of 5. I definitely had no recollection of my life in Texas or any family events. As my relationship with my father and our extended family continued to strengthen, I began to see a bit of me in everyone I met and got to know. I had to learn to deal with all the personality types and how to take the good with the bad. I also had to learn I also learned all the good and dealt with the dirty bits too. Thankfully, that did not overwhelm all the good parts. That concludes another reading from Not My Family. Stay tuned for next reading in the upcoming episodes. Hopefully I won't spoil the plot. But I also wanted to say that I'm excited about the completion of the book, because once you write the book and it's even published and it gets mailed to you as a galley or the final product, this whole self-publishing process in itself is dramatic and can be fraught with many pitfalls. You can get scammed, cheated out of expensive product. You always have to be aware and on your toes. That's why I'm also happy that I am a representative of Traveling Vineyard, and what I'm having right now is the Pasa Robles Vignette Vintage 2016 in my glass while I sip and enjoy being off of work. This has tasting notes of peach nectarine and rich tone, and it was actually finished in an uh, all stainless steel barrel. But they're the little things that are just gratifying when you create your own project. I'm thankful for the experience, and I hope just by me doing these readings and those that have bought the book will actually stay tuned for later readings, would discuss with me, as well as would look forward to the second book, because I plan on serializing this story. There are several things and ideas I've been tossing around, but I think this is just the first part of a multi-part series, and I hope you will enjoy. Thanks. Welcome back to the podcast. Now for the featured tweet or post or statement of the day. Well, it is obvious that I watch a lot of TV. Um, and one of my favorite shows now that I work from home is Dr. Phil. I love this blunt gangster Texan with a degree. Dr. Phil is probably one of the funniest psychologists on the planet. He doesn't play. He does not, he's like one of those he is not a real good negotiator because he doesn't think that you should negotiate with drug addicts, wayward children, or just really stupid people. But it is obvious when he does get exasperated with his guests. Let me back up. One of the things I find about him, it seems like he and Robin genuinely want to help people through their psychological issues. He actually he uses his platform and his resources and contacts as resources to actually help people. You got to want to actually help. He actually can suss out when his guests or when people genuinely want help because he's not going to waste his time. And he can do that very rapidly. But you can tell when he's actually exasperated with his guests because he knows when he's not going to make any difference. And he knows really, he gets or detects really rapidly when they just want to stay stuck in their pathology. You know when he's over it, and when he basically says, I'm just a mandatory reporter. Y'all need to stay in therapy and just go your separate ways. But trust, he will call CPS on your butt. Child Protective Services or whatever social services or the cops if he has to. So when he finally told these guests, do not get together, go your separate ways, I am not going to be able to help you. And he basically ended his show with, when you roll around with pigs, you're going to get covered in mud. And he left it at that, said hello, didn't shake their hand, and just walked to his wife, Robin. It was absolutely hysterical. And if you have ticked off Dr. Phil, that's the end. But anyways, I thought it was probably the funniest things and crazy and hilarious statements to end the day. And I haven't seen or heard anything greater than that. It was funny. But that's actually the end or it for this week's episode of What is TNFro Reading. Join me next time for another episode or podcast. And don't forget, please navigate to patreon.podbean.com/The Talking Fro to become a sponsor or to support the podcast. And also navigate to www.feliciabaxter.com to purchase my book. And as always, remember, be kind, be present, but don't be stupid. Thanks for listening. Until next time.